Monday morning. Stonefield Bank opened in a quiet atmosphere. A 14-year-old black girl named Amara Bennett walked in. She held a folder in her hand, eyes steady. She had come to deposit her first scholarship check, $5,000, that she had earned on her own, not even 60 seconds later. The entire room fell silent. A voice rang out from the teller counter. "A child? With this kind of money? Is this real?" The manager, Margot Lane, looked at Amara as if she were a threat. The teller, Kyle, held the check up to the light, as if examining it as a piece of evidence. Amara tried to stay calm, but her hands began to tremble. She hadn't expected... The only thing that made people suspicious was the color of her skin, and the worst was yet to come. Amara stood there, trying to stay composed while Margot Lane began asking serious questions. "Do you have any documents to prove this money?" Margot asked coldly. Amara handed over her scholarship award letter and her student ID, hands still shaking. Kyle examined the check under a lamp, his eyes full of doubt. No one in the bank seemed to believe her. Other customers began turning to look at her, their gazes filled with suspicion and contempt. Amara felt her heart beating faster, each second passing like a test. She remembered her mother's words. "No matter what, you must hold on to your dignity and stay calm." But every word, every look felt like a knife stabbing at her pride. Amara knew that what she was facing wasn't just doubt over a check. It was deep-rooted discrimination. Time seemed to slow as Amara stood still, the feeling of loneliness growing heavier. Margot turned her back, quietly speaking with Kyle without glancing at the girl again. "We need to investigate this further," Margot said softly, but Amara heard the disdain clearly. Amara looked around the room and saw the different eyes, curious, doubtful, even scornful. She felt an invisible wall separating her from everyone else. A few white customers were being welcomed and helped quickly, while she was left waiting, treated like a suspect. The injustice was obvious, suffocating, but she knew she couldn't give up here. She had to keep her faith and keep fighting for fairness. Amara stood alone in the corner, the feeling of isolation slowly closing in. Margot's footsteps echoed on the cold marble floor, a reminder of how small Amara's place was in this bank. No one spoke to her. No one defended her. Amara looked down at her trembling hands, wishing she could call her mom, but her phone was still at school. She knew she was being treated like an outsider, like she didn't belong. In her mind, questions echoed. Why am I treated this way just because of my skin color? Humiliation began to creep in, but Amara clung to her inner strength, because she knew she couldn't let injustice win. Amara saw an older couple walk into the bank and be warmly greeted by Margot. They were taken straight to the VIP counter, while she still stood in the corner, ignored. The stark difference in treatment made her heart ache. Margot continued to ignore the girl, giving all her attention to important clients. Once again, Amara realized she wasn't being doubted because of the check, but because of her background and her skin. The discrimination wasn't just in words, it was in every action. But deep down, Amara made a silent vow. She would not let this break her. She was standing on a path to learning how to fight back against those biases. Margot turned to Kyle, whispering with pointed intent, "We can't let people think this bank is for everyone." Amara heard every word, her heart tightening in her chest. She realized this wasn't just a one-off incident. It was a system built to exclude people like her. Still, Amara refused to surrender. She pulled out a small notebook and began to write down everything she witnessed. Every look, every word, every discriminatory act, she recorded it all. Because she knew, to change the world, truth must come first. Amara felt the tension in the bank growing. Customers came and went, treated very differently depending on who they were. A white customer was served quickly, while Amara was still left waiting, alone in the middle of the lobby. The injustice felt like an invisible wall separating her from the world, but deep within her a small flame began to rise, a determination not to back down. Amara told herself, no matter how they treat me, I will not let them break me. She kept watching, writing down every detail so she could tell her story with honesty and power. Time dragged on endlessly. Every minute felt like forever for Amara. She still stood there, surrounded by the cold, sterile air of the bank, eyes watching her every move. Margot's footsteps echoed again, a chilling reminder of the injustice hanging in the air. Whispers and sneers floated around, some laced with mocking stares that crushed her spirit. Yet Amara never let go of her pen. She continued to write in her small notebook with careful focus. She knew this wasn't just her story. It was a fight for dignity and justice, for herself and for those who would come after her. Her resolve grew stronger, outshining any shame or hurt. Though isolated, Amara stood firm in the storm. Amara felt tired, but she couldn't let go. She kept standing, closely observing every word and gesture from Margot and Kyle. Margot stayed cold, refusing to clearly explain why the check was under suspicion. Kyle looked at her with eyes filled with doubt, as if searching for guilt. Around her, the atmosphere seemed hostile, full of quiet judgment and whispers. Yet she held on to a remarkable calm, reminding herself this battle wasn't just for her, it was for others too. Amara whispered in her heart, "I will not let this discrimination define who I am." She kept writing, every small detail a building block of truth. The strength inside her was growing, a fire no one could extinguish. The air in the bank grew heavier for Amara. Margot turned to whisper something to Kyle, her eyes filled with contempt and suspicion. Amara heard their biased remarks but couldn't respond. Other customers were quickly served, while she was still stuck there, treated like a foreign object. She felt the injustice thick in the room, but she didn't let it defeat her. She knew the greatest strength was resilience and resolve. With every page written in her notebook, Amara was shaping her own story, a story of justice and unshakable belief. No matter how cold the stares around her grew, she stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. Amara overheard Margot and Kyle whispering again, words not meant for her. "We can't let people think this bank is meant for everyone," Margot said quietly, her voice dripping with intention. Amara felt the pain slice through her like a blade. She knew this wasn't just a personal incident. It was a symptom of a deeper, hidden system of discrimination, but she wouldn't allow herself to be crushed by it. With each written word in her notebook, Amara was documenting the truth, collecting evidence for the fight ahead. Though only 14 years old, she carried within her a powerful resolve, never let discrimination win. Amara told herself, "I will rise, because I deserve to be treated with dignity." The next few minutes were filled with pressure and tension. Amara stood still, silently observing everything around her. White customers were served quickly, smiling, receiving respect. She, meanwhile, remained in place as if she didn't belong. Margot's eyes were cold and filled with contempt, as though she wanted Amara erased, but the girl refused to let that break her. Inside, the fire of determination burned brighter than ever. She knew this moment wasn't just about her, it was for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly for being different, and she would never stop fighting for that justice. Amara remained still, eyes locked on Margot and Kyle, watching every move and word. Margot quietly spoke to the security guard, instructing him to keep an eye on Amara, as if she were a threat. Judging glances and biased stares from people around made Amara feel completely isolated. She wasn't just a child. She was being treated like a criminal because of her skin and presence. Still, Amara had no plans to give up. She quietly opened her notebook again, recording every small thing, from looks and gestures to whispered conversations. Every word was a weapon against the injustice she endured. Amara knew that silence was not an option. She was preparing for a long fight, not just for herself, but for anyone ever targeted by discrimination. Time passed slowly, and Amara stood in her corner, body weary but mind sharp. She noticed Margot continuing to exchange calculating glances with Kyle, as if scheming to make things even harder for her. Other customers were treated with kindness and speed, while Amara was left abandoned under judging eyes. The atmosphere grew heavier. Every footstep, every murmur seemed to press down on her. Still, Amara would not let it break her will. She knew this wasn't just about a check or a bank visit. It was a fight for the right to fairness and respect. With her pen and a notebook in hand, she continued to write, each detail, each word becoming part of her proof. Amara was determined not to let discrimination defeat her. Amara looked around the room and saw people busy with their own lives. No one stood up for her, not even a kind word. She felt the chill of indifference, a loneliness that made her small heart ache. Margot continued to control the situation arrogantly, treating her like she didn't matter. Amara knew that the silence of others only enabled the discrimination. But she didn't let that crush her spirit. In her mind, the fire of determination still burned. Each word in her notebook was a steady step on her path to justice. Amara understood that to change the world, she had to begin with holding firm to her voice and never being silent. Amara noticed Margot speaking with a well-dressed man, eyes sharp and secretive. She didn't fully understand the conversation, but she sensed something unusual. That man appeared powerful, and a known rival of her mother, Elise Bennett. A wave of unease swept over Amara. She realized she wasn't just facing personal discrimination, but standing in the middle of a much larger scheme. But instead of fear, she chose to fight with everything she had. She kept taking notes, every detail carefully logged in her little book, preparing for the steps to come. Because she understood, truth is the strongest weapon against injustice and bias. Amara watched as Margot and the powerful man exchanged a brown briefcase. Even from afar, she could see the word confidential printed clearly on it. Her heart raced. She realized this was no ordinary incident. It was a dangerous plot. The man was Richard Carlyle, her mother Elise Bennett's major competitor. Amara understood that she had just stumbled upon a scheme designed to ruin her family's name. The injustice she was facing was part of a far bigger power game. Still, instead of panicking, Amara felt her determination burn stronger. She opened her notebook again, capturing every move and every word, preparing for the long battle ahead. The conversation between Margot and Richard ended quickly, with exchanged glances full of cunning. Margot returned to the teller counter, her cold eyes fixed directly on Amara. The girl could sense a shift in the air. Margot was no longer just stalling, but trying to control everything related to her. Amara stood silently, still holding her pen and a notebook, ready to record every new detail. Even as things grew more serious, she remained calm and clear-headed. Amara knew that her steadfastness and meticulous notes would be the key to exposing the scheme and reclaiming justice. This was no longer just her story. It had become a fight against a system built on injustice and prejudice. Amara felt Margot's gaze grow colder than ever. She knew every move she made was being closely watched. The bank security guard nearby had clearly been instructed to monitor her every step. Each passing second stretched endlessly under the weight of silent pressure. Despite her exhaustion, Amara held firm, refusing to yield to discrimination. She quietly wrote down every gesture, every word in her notebook, gathering evidence for the fight ahead. In her heart, she reminded herself, no matter how hard they try to stop me, I will never be silent. That was the strength of a 14-year-old girl, resilient and unshakable. Now, Amara was no longer just a lone girl. She began to recognize the inner power within herself, the strength of perseverance and courage. Each line in her notebook was a silent declaration of truth and injustice. Margot, despite trying to maintain control, couldn't hide the worry flickering in her eyes when she glanced at Amara. Customers and staff in the bank began whispering about what was happening. Amara understood that her story wasn't about a bank transaction. It was something much larger. It was a battle against prejudice, discrimination, and systemic injustice. And she was determined to stand firm, not backing down until justice was served. Amara overheard whispers between Margot and a newly arrived man, Richard Carlyle. They exchanged quick words about a plan to undermine her mother, Elise Bennett. Richard's eyes were full of calculation, clearly plotting his next move. Amara felt the gravity of the situation sink in, her heart pounding faster. She knew she was no longer fighting just for herself, but for her family and their future. Her resolve only grew stronger as she carefully continued recording every detail. Amara knew that only with truth and proof in hand could she defeat this dark scheme. And she was ready to rise, bravely facing the challenge ahead. Margot stood tall, trying to maintain composure after Richard Carlyle left the bank. She turned back, her eyes sharp and cold, as if focusing all her power on Amara. The bank suddenly grew oppressively silent, with every eye on the girl, an unwanted center of attention. Amara could feel the pressure building by the second, but she refused to break or back down. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and continued documenting every word and gesture around her. This fight was no longer about a check or a simple transaction. It was a much greater battle for truth and justice. Amara knew she had to be stronger and braver than ever to face the rising storm. With every line in her notebook, she was building the foundation for the change to come. Now Amara knew she wasn't standing alone in this fight. She knew her mother, Elise Bennett, was watching and ready to stand by her side. Amara remembered her mother's words. No matter how hard it gets, always hold on to your faith and never be afraid to stand up for the truth. A powerful sense of strength spread through the girl, fueling her resistance against injustice. In the bank, those around her began to pay closer attention to her story. Some customers quietly exchanged sympathetic looks, while Margot and Kyle appeared increasingly tense. Amara continued to write, recording every small detail with care as evidence. She knew this was just the beginning of a long journey to reclaim justice and dignity. Amara heard the bank doors open. A figure stepped in. It was Elise Bennett, her mother, calm yet exuding power. Every eye in the room turned immediately, and the atmosphere tensed. Elise walked straight forward without acknowledging Margot, her eyes fixed on her daughter. Her voice was calm but commanding. "Amara, are you all right?" Amara nodded, trying to hide the exhaustion and stress she had endured. Her mother stepped up to the counter, eyes challenging both Margot and Kyle. Elise's presence was a clear warning. This injustice would not be tolerated. Amara felt steadier than ever, knowing that her strength was no longer hers alone. Her mother was with her. Elise looked directly at Margot, her voice cold and resolute. "What is going on here? Why is my daughter being treated this way?" Margot tried to maintain her composure, but her eyes betrayed worry and defensiveness. The entire bank seemed to hold its breath, watching the confrontation between a powerful mother and the bank manager. Elise stepped beside Amara, gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder, offering strength and comfort. Amara felt her mother's warmth like a shield, protecting her from all prejudice. Margot had no words left to say. Her confidence faded under Elise's piercing gaze. Elise's arrival had not only shifted the situation, it marked a turning point in the battle for justice. Elise pulled a thick folder from her bag and laid it on the counter in front of Margot. With a commanding tone, she said, "I want to know why Amara has been treated like this, and I demand a clear explanation." Margot lowered her head, flustered and unsure how to respond to Elise's authority. Every eye in the bank turned to them, the tension about to snap. Amara stood beside her mother, feeling protected and empowered by her presence. She knew this wasn't just personal anymore. It was a battle for all who had been mistreated. Elise continued, "This bank will be held accountable for this discrimination, and I will make sure it never happens again." Her words rang out like a warning, not just to Margot, but to everyone in the bank. Margot could no longer hide her panic. Her eyes flashed with fear and anger. She tried to justify her actions, but Elise wouldn't let her speak. "That's enough, Margot," Elise said firmly. "We do not tolerate discrimination here." Bank employees began to take notice. The air grew heavier, tenser than ever. Amara stood by her mother, feeling proud and stronger than before. This powerful woman was not only protecting her daughter, but fighting for justice and change. The confrontation made one thing clear. Injustice could not survive when courage and truth stood against it. This was the beginning of a larger transformation. Elise stared coldly at Margot, her voice stern and authoritative. "I will launch a full investigation into your conduct at this bank." Everyone around fell silent, waiting for Margot's response. She said nothing, just bowed her head. Amara stood beside her mother, her eyes resolute and filled with hope. She knew Elise's arrival had changed the game completely. She was no longer the girl who had been looked down on. She now held the power of truth and justice. The fight for fairness had begun, and it would not end easily. Amara silently promised herself to keep rising, never stop fighting for what was right. The investigation inside the bank began swiftly, creating an atmosphere of urgency and tension. Margot's previous acts of discrimination were gradually exposed through reports and testimonies from other staff. Kyle, the young teller, began to show signs of change, realizing the wrong in how Amara had been treated. People started to understand this wasn't just an isolated incident, it was a systemic issue that needed to be addressed. Amara followed every development, sensing that justice was slowly being restored. The strength of her mother and her own resilience had sparked real change. She knew the road ahead was long, but the first step had been taken. And that alone gave hope to everyone who had ever been wronged like her. Amara felt the shift in the air as the investigation took hold. Both Margot and Kyle were tense, knowing their discriminatory actions were being exposed. Whispers and nervous glances among bank employees made it clear things were serious now. Amara stood beside her mother, witnessing justice beginning to rise. She understood that it was through perseverance in Elise's support that injustice would no longer go unchallenged. This fight wasn't hers alone. It belonged to many others as well. And Amara was determined to continue walking this difficult but hopeful path. Margot began to feel mounting pressure as higher-level bank officials demanded clarity. She could no longer deny the evidence Amara had recorded and Elise had gathered. Kyle, too, started to rethink his actions and reconsider how customers should be treated. Stonefield Bank began retraining its staff on equality and anti-discrimination policies. Amara felt proud witnessing this shift, though she knew the journey was far from over. She held on to her belief and stood ready to be a voice for the forgotten. Every step she took carried great meaning, offering hope for a fairer future. Amara realized the fight wasn't confined to the bank. It was spreading through the community. Her story began circulating, becoming a source of inspiration for many. Social organizations took notice and began speaking out against discrimination in public services. Elise used her influence to drive systemic change and protect the rights of all customers. Amara felt proud seeing how strength and justice could ripple outward. Though challenges lay ahead, she knew she wasn't alone in the fight. She continued documenting her story, hoping it would inspire others to stand up for what's right. Public attention forced Stonefield Bank to act swiftly. The leadership organized mandatory anti-discrimination awareness training for all staff. New policies were implemented to ensure every customer was treated with fairness and respect. Amara and Elise became symbols of positive change in the financial industry. The story of a 14-year-old girl inspired thousands to stand up against injustice. Amara knew the road ahead was still long, but every step she took helped build a better future. And she continued to write, documenting every piece of evidence for the journey still to come. Amara began participating in seminars on customer rights and anti-discrimination. She shared her story with a wide audience, from students to finance professionals. Her strength and perseverance moved many and inspired change. Elise supported her daughter by advocating for reform policies within the banking sector. Together, they created a powerful voice for justice and equality. Amara understood this was no longer just a personal story, it was a larger mission. With every step, she was helping to write history for a more just society. Amara's life began to change as she became the face of the anti-discrimination movement. She received invitations to media programs and community events. Every time she spoke, Amara delivered a message of resilience and justice. At the same time, Elise worked tirelessly to push for stronger customer protection policies in banking. The collaboration between mother and daughter created an unstoppable force. Amara knew that true change only happened when everyone stood together. She felt proud watching her dream of a society without prejudice slowly become reality. Amara realized that fighting back wasn't just about reacting, it was about educating. She began participating in school programs focused on diversity and inclusion. Her stories helped students better understand the harmful effects of bias and discrimination. Elise also led specialized training sessions for bank employees. Their goal was to build a fair, welcoming, and respectful work environment. Amara felt joy knowing that every effort she made was changing minds. She knew the journey would be long, but perseverance would bring meaningful results. Amara began noticing small changes in her daily life. People around her, friends, teachers, became more open and aware of discrimination. At the bank, younger staff started treating customers with greater fairness and respect. Still, Amara knew challenges remained, and she couldn't let her guard down. She continued taking notes, preparing for any future battles. Her resilience and determination made her a role model for youth fighting for justice. Amara smiled, believing that with courage and unity, justice would prevail. Amara began planning a public awareness campaign to highlight discrimination in public services. She connected with social groups and nonprofits to amplify her message. Her goal was to help people understand that fairness is not just a right, it's a shared responsibility. Elise supported her by providing access to resources in a vast network. Amara felt proud knowing her voice was being heard and making a difference. She believed that if everyone spoke up, the world would grow better each day. That was the power of her unwavering faith and perseverance. Amara continued sharing her story at community events and conferences. She inspired many young people to rise up against prejudice and injustice. Every word she spoke reflected strength and belief in change. She gained widespread support from organizations and individuals committed to human rights. Elise continued working to improve customer protection policies, creating fairness in the banking world. Together, mother and daughter became symbols of resilience and justice. They proved that even in the face of hardship, determination and faith lead to victory. Amara realized that true change required building connections with like-minded individuals. She began forming a support group where people could share their stories and find solutions to discrimination. The group quickly gained attention, becoming a strong, united community. Elise used her influence to support the group, helping them access resources and media exposure. Amara felt the power of unity as people stood together for a common cause. She knew that only with collective action could lasting change occur, and she was determined to lead this community towards success, for a more just society for all. The support group Amara launched continued to grow in size and influence. Members shared personal stories and worked together to find ways to combat discrimination. Amara became a leader, an inspiration, bringing people together. Elise backed the group by advocating for broader customer rights protections. Public perception began to shift as more people spoke out against societal injustice. Amara felt proud that her perseverance had sparked such strong momentum. She understood this was just the beginning, and though the journey would be long, she would never give up. Amara expanded her network by connecting with international human rights organizations. She was invited to major conferences to share her experience and promote global change. Elise continued to support her by leveraging her influence in finance to open doors for new policies. Amara's determination and courage became a source of inspiration to thousands around the world. She knew that despite the challenges ahead, the power of unity and justice would prevail. Amara kept recording every step, preparing for what lay ahead. With a heart full of hope, she continued walking the path of justice. Amara began receiving attention from the media and broader public. Her story spread widely, becoming a symbol for the movement against discrimination in public services. Many people sent messages of support and joined the fight for justice. Elise took the opportunity to push banking leaders towards systemic reforms. Together, they organized media campaigns, staff training, and public awareness initiatives. Amara felt proud seeing her personal story ripple outward with deep impact. Though the journey ahead was long, she remained steadfast and determined. Her persistence had become a flame of inspiration for everyone on the path to change. Amara recognized the power of connection and collaboration. She and Elise expanded their network, joining forces with nonprofits and advocacy groups to promote equality. Their efforts quickly gained traction and widespread support. Amara shared her story at numerous events, encouraging young people to stand up for their rights. Elise continued leveraging her influence to push for industry-wide policy change. The partnership between mother and daughter became an unstoppable force. Amara believed that when people united, fairness and equality could become reality. She continued walking this challenging path with hope and unshakable faith. The changes within Stonefield Bank became more evident with each passing day. And diversity and inclusion training sessions were held regularly. Bank employees were educated on equality and their responsibilities in serving customers. Margot gradually lost her authority, while Kyle showed real improvement in how he treated others. Amara and Elise saw the first fruits of their tireless efforts. They knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey, but their faith and determination grew stronger than ever. Together they continued building an environment of fairness, respect, and inclusion for all. Elise entered the bank with calm authority. All eyes immediately turned to her, the room filled with tension and hope. She walked to the counter and said firmly, "I will not allow anyone to be treated unfairly in this bank." Margot lowered her head, realizing that inevitable change was coming. Amara stood beside her mother, feeling the strength and safety Elise brought. Elise's presence marked a turning point, a clear sign that justice would be restored. The entire bank seemed to awaken, realizing injustice's time was up. Amara knew this was the beginning of a new, hopeful chapter. Elise stood before the entire bank staff, her voice steady and commanding. She announced a series of reforms to eliminate discrimination and build a fair workplace. Everyone listened closely, aware of how crucial this change was. Margot felt more pressure than ever, her career now hanging in the balance. Amara felt proud. Her mother was not only her protector, but also a leader for change. This powerful woman inspired all, proving that justice and equality were not distant dreams. Elise's first steps marked the beginning of a long but hopeful journey, and Amara knew, with her mother by her side, she would continue fighting for truth and justice. New policies began rolling out across Stonefield Bank. Training programs on equality and customer respect became mandatory. Employees were encouraged to report misconduct and discriminatory behavior. Margot underwent a thorough investigation and gradually lost her position of power. Kyle and many other staff members changed their attitudes, serving customers with more fairness and respect. Amara followed each step of progress with joy and hope. She knew these changes were the result of relentless perseverance and effort. It was clear proof of the power of unity and determination in the fight for justice. Amara attended training sessions and seminars to share her experience and inspire others. She spoke about the importance of perseverance and courage when facing discrimination. Her story was no longer just a personal account. It became a symbol of a positive change. Elise continued to advocate for widespread implementation of fair policies in the financial sector. Together, they not only transformed one bank, but helped spark a wave of reform across the industry. Amara felt proud to be part of such meaningful change. She knew the journey ahead would be long, but with collective effort, justice would become reality. Amara and Elise organized community gatherings to discuss equality and combating discrimination. These heartfelt conversations raised awareness and built connections between people. New ideas emerged to promote fairer workplaces and a more inclusive society. Amara was happy to see her efforts yielding tangible results. Elise used her influence to support training programs and policy development. Their combined strength was a testament to unyielding perseverance and determination. Amara believed that when people worked together, justice and equality could become lasting realities. Tensions rose when Elise demanded an official explanation from Margot for her discriminatory behavior. Margot tried to justify herself, but the evidence and staff support left her defenseless. The bank's leadership decided to immediately terminate Margot to demonstrate their commitment to change. Amara stood beside her mother, feeling pride and a sense that justice had been served. This moment marked a crucial turning point in their fight against injustice. Elise pledged to continue monitoring and ensuring policies were upheld. Amara knew this was only the beginning, and she would keep fighting to protect the rights of all people. Margot was escorted out of the bank by security under the silent gaze of everyone present. Her face showed clear disappointment, realizing her power and status were now stripped away. The atmosphere in the bank lightened as justice was visibly enforced. Amara stood next to her mother, sensing fairness returning to the space. The incident sent a powerful message. No one is allowed to violate human dignity and rights. Elise pressed forward with reforms, determined to build a work environment that respected all customers. Amara felt proud of the change they had created and remained committed to fighting for a more just future for everyone. Following Margot's dismissal, Stonefield Bank began implementing significant reforms. Equality and diversity training programs were held more frequently to raise staff awareness. Amara took an active role in oversight and shared her real-life experiences to help others. Elise supported the creation of new policies to prevent future injustices. Bank staff gradually shifted their attitudes, treating customers with greater fairness and respect. The surrounding community began to feel the positive impact, regaining trust in fairness and dignity. Amara and Elise continued their journey together, challenging but full of hope. Amara began receiving invitations to media programs to share her story and inspire the public. She spoke about the power of perseverance, courage, and the right to be treated fairly. Her words motivated many young people to rise up against prejudice and injustice. Elise continued to advocate for stronger customer protections in the financial industry. Together, mother and daughter became symbols of resilience and justice, bringing hope to many. Amara knew the road ahead was still long, but with unity they could create lasting change. She was determined to keep going, never stopping her fight for a fair and equal society. Amara and Elise continued organizing community discussions on equality and anti-discrimination. These honest conversations raised awareness and brought people closer together. New ideas emerged to build fairer workplaces and a more just society. Amara felt happy seeing her efforts produce real change. Elise leveraged her influence to support training programs and new policy development. Their mother-daughter bond stood as a testament to unrelenting perseverance and commitment. Amara believed that when people united, equality and justice could truly be sustained. Amara's life became increasingly intertwined with the fight for justice and equality. She continued inspiring young people and communities through her speeches and social efforts. Amara deeply understood that meaningful change required time and collective dedication. Elise remained by her side, offering wisdom and experience from her background in finance. Together, they formed an unstoppable force, overcoming every challenge. Amara felt proud that each small step she took helped change society, and she knew the journey was far from over. But faith and persistence would guide the way. Amara realized that real change required inspiring the next generation. She began organizing workshops and educational programs for students. Her stories helped young people understand the real effects of bias and discrimination. Elise supported the mission by connecting experts and funding these educational projects, and together they built a foundation for a new generation, aware and responsible. Amara believed that only by transforming the minds and actions of the youth could society truly progress. With unwavering faith, she continued walking her long, challenging, but hopeful path. Amara no longer felt alone in her fight against injustice. She received strong support from the community, friends, and like-minded individuals. These united voices formed a collective strength that drove societal change. Elise continued policy advocacy and supported development and training programs for equality. Amara clearly felt the power of unity and perseverance in each of her steps. She understood the road ahead was long, but they had already come so far, and she was determined not to stop, continuing to rise for a society of fairness and respect. Amara stood before a crowd, sharing her story with confidence and strength. She emphasized the importance of never giving up in the face of injustice and prejudice. Her words inspired thousands, especially young people. Elise stood beside her, proud of her daughter and the journey they had walked together. Amara knew the fight wasn't over, but she had become a powerful voice for change. She urged everyone to rise, speak out, and fight for justice. With a steadfast heart, Amara was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead for a brighter future. Amara returned to Stonefield Bank, not as the girl once mistreated, but as a voice of inspiration, a symbol of resilience and justice. Every eye in the room now looked at her with respect and admiration. Amara smiled, recalling the difficult journey from isolation to strength. She said to the crowd, "If you've ever been underestimated, never stay silent. Speak up, stand up for yourself." Applause erupted through the room, affirming the power of struggle and perseverance. And Amara's story didn't end there. It was only the beginning. The fight for truth and justice continued, with each and every one of us.